Be seated. Before I get into the word this morning, I think it's only appropriate that we remember the victims of the terrible shooting last Sunday in Sutherland, Texas. I know that for many of you there are concerns for our own safety in this congregation. And for many of you, you would have received an email this week outlining the precautions that we are taking in this congregation to ensure your safety and to ensure that you are provided for and cared for whilst you are here in this church. And so you may have noticed this morning some security, not just in the parking lot, but on the outside of the church, ensuring our safety, making sure that we are protected. I also want to invite you, just before I preach this morning, to look around the building and to see where the exits are in our building. You will see them signaled by the red exit signs over towards the orchestra, over towards the chapel side of our sanctuary, for those in the rear of the building on this side through the kitchen, and for those of us in the rear of this building directly behind us through the Hall of Heroes. It is your responsibility to know where your exit is and to take care of you and to take care of one another. We live in a very different time than many of us was raised in. And whilst we do not want to raise the anxiety level of any individual in this church, we also need to be practical. And so if you are asked by a security officer or by a member of staff, or if you are questioned, please just be courteous, because all we're doing is making sure that you are as safe as possible whenever we're in this sacred space. I believe that will enable us to relax and to be able to enjoy the experience of worship, and to know that your ushers and greeters are well trained in making sure that we know how to leave, not for an active shooter, but in case of fire or for some other reason. So take a moment now and just look around, see where your exit is, and know it for future reference. Is that fair? That's fair. Yeah, I felt like... There we go. Feel relaxed now? Okay, let's pray together. God, we thank you for this day and for all that it is and all that it is yet to become. We thank you for this opportunity to be in this holy space, this sacred space that is created holy and sacred because each and every one of us is in this space. Help us to bring our full and authentic self to this place this day so that we might be able to hear your Spirit and the still small voice of God speaking to us now. Open us to the experience of the divine that can transform us and bring us new life. And now, God, I pray that you would touch my lips of clay, mold them into the words that need to be spoken this day, and may the words that come from my mouth and the meditations on each and every one of our hearts, may they be ever acceptable to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So we're formulating some kind of a tradition here at Cathedral of Hope United Church of Christ that November seems to be this season of remembering, a season where we honor the folks who have gone before us, we honor our Thanksgiving, we take an opportunity, it's towards the end of the church's calendar, to prepare ourselves for Advent and then for Christmas and then for New Year. An opportunity for us to remember those last Sunday as we gathered, to remember those who had gone on before us. And we talked about the great cloud of witness that surrounds us. And we learned and shared our memories and our thoughts and our feelings. And we're compelled, I believe, to remember those who have been mentors to us, those who have been examples to us, those who have perhaps led the way for us, those trailblazers in our lives that we have often given thanks for and that we stand on the shoulders on. We also called ourselves to a place of action, reminding ourselves that there are others who look to us as mentors. There are others who look to us for inspiration. There are others, whether we know it or whether we do not know it, who somehow see our lives and people who want to emulate who we are. reminding ourselves always that we are in this together, that as people of faith, surrounded by the great cloud of witness, that we have been called to the race that's been set before us, and that we must do it with honor and with respect and with love for one another. Remembering those who have gone before us. Today we remember our veterans. And what an honor to see the number of veterans in our own congregation who stood before us this morning and who have been in the service to protect us and to give us some freedoms, and who have been around the work of peace. You see, I truly believe that the work of the armed forces and for those who are in active service is really about peace. Yes, we understand that sometimes folks have to go to war, but the essence of protection and liberty and life are the core values of who we are. And their service is much appreciated. I'm also reminded, however, that the world as it was not made with borders and boundaries. That when God created the heavens and the earth, God created it all for us to enjoy without the borders and without the boundaries that we have established as humanity and that we somehow call ourselves to protect. Grateful for what the service peoples do, but I truly believe that our mission as people of faith is to bring back this sense of one world, of one people. And through the divisions that have been created by humankind, if we are truly in the inspiration of God who calls us to be peacemakers, that we should be finding some way in which we can get together and create this one world of peace, where all human life is honored, all human life is valued, and that all human life is seen as part of this sibling relationship that we have as children of a loving God. It may feel like a big task before us, but I truly believe that that is what Jesus calls us to. Now, I'm also aware that when we talk about peace within our congregation and between our world, we sometimes think of peace as this kind of kumbaya moment. Where we all stand in a big circle and we sing kumbaya. I don't believe that is Jesus' vision of peace. I believe that God's inspiration for peace was a world where all are felt welcomed and included. Indeed, if you listen to the words from the book of Psalms this morning, that was our Hebrew scriptures, you would have heard the psalmist say that there are two components to peace. There is peace and there is justice. And that the true essence of peace that comes to the world is not the kumbaya moment. The true peace that comes to the world is when there is justice for all people. A justice that will call us and raise us and illuminate the places in our world where there is injustice. To illuminate all of those things so that they come into the light, and that as we come into the light, so we can produce healing, which ultimately produces peace. We are called as people of faith to be peacemakers. And through being called to be peacemakers, we are also called, therefore, to be justice creators. And as justice creators in this world at this time, that means that we need to bring into the light some of the issues of our own country and of our own world that need some light and some hope and some healing. And to be the peacemakers in the world. That means that whenever we see injustice as people of faith, we have to raise it up. We have to speak about it. We have to speak our truth to its power. And in this country, right at this moment, there are many of those things that we need to be speaking about. There is such division in our country. It seems like that is the new phrase. We are such a divisive country, such a divided world. And we're called to be justice makers and peace creators. That means that we have to raise issues like transgender folk in the armed forces. It means that we have to raise issues of the Muslim ban or the travel ban of others coming into our country just because of their faith. It means that we have to raise the issues of racism and classism and sexism. It means that we have to raise these issues so that they are brought into the light so that we can begin the hard work of justice and bringing about peace in the world. I truly believe that's what our veterans signed up for. To be peace creators, to find ways in which we might work together for justice and for peace. As Reverend Aaron shared in the announcements over these last couple of weeks, we have begun some table talk opportunities. Table Talk is our sermon series on Wednesday, and Table Talk is our small gatherings on Tuesday evenings, helping us to navigate some of the awkward conversations that we might have over the next few weeks as we gather for Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner or some other gathering that we might be in. I have a feeling that some of the conversations we might be having this year may be a little different than the conversations we were having last year. It seems to me that there is not only division in our world and in our communities, but sometimes there is division amongst us. That somehow in this way that these topics have been raised, that they have caused us to go into one camp or the other. And that somehow as we get into those places of conviction or those places of sitting on one side or the other, it seems that not one of us is able to communicate with the other. It seems to me that instead of building bridges that enable us to find ways in which we find our common unity as human beings, instead of seeing the bridge as a place of coming together, we've seen the bridge as a place of building our own camps and throwing rocks at each other. It's sad that we have found ourselves in this place, especially as people of faith. And I want to just tell you, I think the church is sometimes the worst place for it. That sometimes we use our religious language and our religious baggage as some kind of justification for discrimination and for bigotry. I'm sure that as we gather over those conversations, unless you choose those people who sit at your tables carefully, there will be some differences of opinion. And those differences of opinion, I believe, as we sit around those tables, we have that opportunity to be those people who are called to be peacemakers and to be justice creators. And that doesn't mean that we should sit around the table and bite our tongue when something is said that we don't necessarily agree with. But it does mean that instead of throwing rocks at the person who said it, we might take the opportunity to sit casually and compassionately with one another and hear the stories of one another that help us understand how we gained that opinion in the very first place. I truly believe that many of us are the victims of toxic theology and toxic life that somehow has put us into this camp of division rather than this place of unity. Jesus calls us to be peacemakers and to remember at this day our veterans who worked for peace. It's incumbent on us to find opportunities in where we might build bridges that we might meet in the middle. As many of you know, last evening we were at the black tie event, and I'm always grateful to be able to be at certain events like that, especially as two dads with a 3-year-old. And we were lucky enough last night to have some adult time. And Isaiah's sister came over, and she was going to do a sleepover, and she babysat for Sophia. And so we were like, yee-hee! And so we got ourselves off to the black tie event, and we got ourselves home a little before 11:30, something like that. And I swiftly took myself off to bed because I had to be up very early this morning for worship. Very early this morning for worship. And I realized that suddenly I was hearing conversation in the kitchen. Isaiah and his sister were having a conversation. Now, Isaiah was raised here in Dallas. He's Latino, and he was raised here in Dallas by two parents who were both Pentecostal pastors. So there's some baggage that perhaps exists in his family. Some baggage around what is theology and how is that theology lived out. And there is no escaping the reality that Isaiah and his sister sit on two different places when it comes to justice and to theology. Isaiah did not get to bed last night. At 6 o'clock this morning when my alarm went off, I still heard them in the kitchen. But I heard them throughout the night, just raising their voices a little to be heard. I could hear some of the conversation, and to give honor to that conversation, I don't necessarily need to reveal all of it, but just assume that there were some differences of opinion. I did hear at one point, love the sinner, hate the sin. I did hear at one point, why do LGBT people want to throw their lifestyles down our throats? I did hear, why is there special rights for some and not for others? Now, I don't want to demonize Isaiah's sister. She is a great woman. She is a product, however, of a world and a theology that divides rather than unites. And so as their conversation continued, and as I tried to drift off back to sleep, which is very difficult when I can hear a conversation, and as I would wake periodically, I would continue to hear this conversation evolving. And as my alarm, as I say, went off at 6 o'clock, I still heard them at it. Didn't get a wink of sleep last night. I suddenly realized, as Isaiah then came while I was showering this morning back into the room and apologized for not going to bed, we started to have a conversation about what the conversation was about. And what we finally came down to in those few minutes that we got to share with one another is that they realized that they needed to find within their differences some commonalities, some place where they could sit and agree on. That they knew that they were fundamentally perhaps disagreeing on big issues, but they're good people. And they wanted to find that place in the middle, on the bridge, that place where they could sit for a moment and perhaps just agree to disagree without having to fight and squabble. Isaiah loves his sister, and his sister loves Isaiah. And ultimately what it came down to was the place that they could meet on the bridge together was that ultimately, as people of faith, they had to believe in the golden rule of Jesus. The golden rule of every Abrahamic faith and of all faiths and of no faiths. That perhaps we could meet on the bridge where we would say to one another, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. And to question for ourselves if we could just meet on the bridge at that place, perhaps we could then begin to do the hard work of justice and of peace. That if we could really follow this commandment of Jesus to love one another as I have loved you. Not just love those who look like us, or think like us, or theologize like us, or a bit more Jesus-y than us. Perhaps we could do and begin that hard work of sitting in that uncomfortable place of disagreement, but knowing that there is a greater purpose and a greater mission for us if we might just learn to love one another. If we could just begin to do unto others as we would want done unto ourselves. I wonder if we could remind ourselves of that as we sit around our tables so that we don't get to a place of argument and confrontation and getting entrenched on our side of the bridge. But perhaps then we could raise the issues in a way of compassion and kindness toward one another. Not just the relative that you know is going to be an awkward what's it when they sit at the table, but sometimes when we sit at tables with each other, and we know that we make comment and we make judgment that is far beyond what we should be doing, and challenge ourselves lovingly and graciously and with sincere compassion. But perhaps then we might hear the word of Jesus one more time, who on the Sermon on the Mount said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall inherit the new realm of God." We are called Cathedral of Hope United Church of Christ, a vibrant, inclusive, and progressive congregation. And as a vibrant, inclusive, progressive congregation, if we sit with our discomfort sometimes, but that doesn't mean that we don't sit together at all times. I pray that Veterans Day would be a great challenge and a great reminder, yes, to give thanks for those who have kept us safe and have guaranteed our freedoms, but that we might also remind ourselves, whether we have served in the armed forces or not, that we too are called to the work of the veteran, to be peacemakers, to be those who will show compassion and kindness. That doesn't mean that we're a doormat, but it does mean that we have the responsibility of beginning the journey to cross the bridge so that we might meet others as they are crossing the bridge toward us, and find ways together where we might be able to eradicate things like racism and sexism and ageism and ableism and all of the other isms that have been so placed before us that often divide us rather than find the commonalities together, that basically are summed up in this: love one another as I have loved you. Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. If we could live just by those two rules, perhaps peace and perhaps justice might visit our earth this day. God bless you. Cathedral of Hope, United Church of Christ.